The topic of my literature review is impact of COVID-19 on UK university students. The first reports of COVID-19 in the UK occurred in January 2020, with confirmation of person-to-person transmission in late February. It brought many changes to UK higher education, like the transition to online learning. Consequently, it is meaningful to investigate how the pandemic influenced UK university students. This investigation can not only help students and policymakers better deal with similar disruptions in the future, but also provide suggestions for the development of technology-enhanced education. Regarding the data search procedures, the database I used were Google Scholar and University Library, and I used the method of AND or NOT. At first, my topic was not limited to the UK. After searching, I realized that my topic was too broad because there were too many search results on Google Scholar. So I limited my topic. I looked at many articles related to my research topic and picked out 3 articles that were cited enough times and had a research methods section. In addition, the paradigms of them are interpretivism, critical theory, and positivism respectively, with different research designs. Peer-reviewed articles in the university library are labeled, and I can also confirm it by searching the journals and checking whether the journals are peer-reviewed. The first study is about engineering students' experiences during the pandemic. The paradigm of it is interpretivism, and the research problem is what are the experiences of university students in the UK and the effects of immediate adjustments on the teaching, learning, and assessment of the lockdown. In-depth semi-structured interviews were utilized, and participants are 11 postgraduate students in 3 UK universities. Besides, both semantic and discourse analysis were used. Regarding the key findings of the research, most of the students are dissatisfied with how effective online learning was during the pandemic. A cause of this phenomenon is the lack of sufficient interactions amongst students. Educators must re-evaluate existing technology-mediated teaching, and students should exhibit adaptability. Talking about the paradigm criteria of quality, triangulation is achieved because both discourse analysis and semantic analysis were used. However, fidelity, transparency, and consistency are not met. Here are some possible limitations given the paradigm. Firstly, this study emphasizes creating an integrated and newsworthy narrative instead of verifying the accuracy of the interpretations created, because researchers didn't double-check the interpretations with participants. Secondly, the phenomenon that one set of factors rather than another caused certain results cannot be proved. In this study, there are only 11 participants, and the influence of their different backgrounds, like the socioeconomic status of their families, on the research result is not taken into consideration. In terms of ethics, authors mentioned that informed consent was signed off by all participants prior to the interviews. Participants were notified of the voice recordings and the anonymity of their involvement. Interviews were like friendly discussions, and participants looked relaxed. There is also an acknowledgement section in the article. Regarding impact, findings of this research suggest that educators must re-evaluate existing technology-mediated education methods to guarantee effective learning. Students should exhibit adaptability and open-mindedness so that they can adjust to the changing higher education environment. Besides, there is a theme about experiences regarding future changes. The second study is about the influence of COVID-19 on international university students. The paradigm of it is critical theory, and the research problem is what are international students' views and experiences of the pandemic, social restrictions, and self-isolation, as well as possible influence on their health and existence demands. Regarding the research design, 8 online focus groups with international students and semi-structured interviews with the university staff were used. Participants are international students and staff at a university in England. Besides, semantic analysis was used. In terms of the key findings of this research, firstly, international students were concerned and dissatisfied about the transition to online education. Moreover, university employees believe that in-person lectures were more helpful than online education, especially for international students. for whom English is a second language. Besides, international students wanted better communication and practical assistance from the university. Next, international students were likely to put a lot of pressure on themselves to perform well. Finally, university employees defined mental health as a real taboo among international students. Regarding ethics, authors mentioned that the University of Nottingham Faculty of Medicine and Health Sciences Research Ethics Committee gave their approval to the study protocol. Moreover, participants in the student focus group received a voucher. Besides, funding, institutional review board statement, informed consent statement, data availability statement, acknowledgements, conflicts of interest are also mentioned in the article. In terms of impact of the research, firstly, the research results can help governments and university authorities support international students. Additionally, there is a list of implications for university policy and student assistance programs. Considering the paradigm criteria of quality, catalytic validity is achieved because suggestions and methods to mitigate the negative effects on international students are emphasized. Horizontal validity is also met because topic guides for the interviews and focus groups were evaluated by international students to ensure clarity for non-native English speakers. Due to the qualitative method used, interpretivism's criteria of quality can also be taken into consideration. Firstly, fidelity is met because focus group moderators utilized prompts, restated or modified questions when participants' responses showed that they didn't understand the core idea of the question. Additionally, triangulation is also achieved due to the reason that online focus groups with international students and semi-structured interviews with university staff are both used. However, transparency and consistency are not met according to the descriptions of methods. About possible limitations given paradigm, first of all, the base bias due to the prior assumption on the nature of the phenomena, which is that the needs of international students are overlooked in this study, favors certain explanations of the data while ignoring contrary information. Additionally, its critiques of organizations and social practice are unworthy, since the real-world limitations are ignored. For example, in this study, suggestions for university policy can be unworthy because universities have limited human resources. Due to the qualitative methods used, there are also limitations due to interpretivism. Firstly, this study cannot demonstrate that one collection of elements instead of another lead to certain results. For example, in this study, backgrounds of individuals include a range of factors and it is difficult to determine the role of each single factor plays during the pandemic. Secondly, descriptions are ambiguous or inconsistent to serve as a reliable foundation for contrasting the orientations of different individuals, the features of various circumstances or organizations, and so on. In this study, all the participants are from various ethnic and cultural groups. How these factors relate with the impact are not explained. The final study is about the influence of COVID-19 on UK final year medical students. The paradigm of it is positivism, and the research problem is what are COVID-19's effects and placements in the UK, as well as how it may affect their readiness and confidence before starting their foundation training. Considering the research design, an online survey consisting of 10 items was sent to final year medical students from 33 medical schools in the UK. The survey has dichotomous, multiple choice, and Likert response scale questions. Moreover, descriptive statistics was used. In terms of the key findings, firstly, the influence of COVID-19 on medical student education is considerable, especially regarding the transition from students to doctors. Secondly, the influence to student assistantships significantly impacted confidence and readiness of students. Finally, participants believe that participating in hospitals during the outbreak is a meaningful learning opportunity. Considering possible limitations given paradigm, firstly, it ignores how the researcher creates the phenomena portrayed in findings, as well as rhetoric and narratives influence in academic reports, and humans are treated as quantitative or aggregate terms. About the paradigm criteria of quality, only external validity is not achieved because the response rate of the survey is only 5.9%. In terms of ethics, participation was voluntary and no identifying information was recorded. Moreover, the NHS Research Ethics Committee of the Medical Research Council decided that ethical approval was unnecessary for the research. Additionally, potential participants were told that by answering the survey, they would be given permission for the usage, analysis, and possible publication of their anonymized data. Regarding the impact, improved methods for helping students transition into the workforce are mentioned. Moreover, suggestions are provided. For example, the ability to conduct final year exams remotely must be developed in order to prepare for potential pandemics or other disruptions. Additionally, the number of citations is 258. This slide shows a comparison between these studies. In terms of the strengths of the first study are, firstly, participants have various backgrounds, so that the data collected can be more reliable. Moreover, both semantic and discourse analysis were used. Additionally, the method of data collection is in-depth, semi-structured interviews, so that the data collection process is more flexible. For example, the questions asked can vary with the answers of previous questions regarding the strengths of the second study. Firstly, the topic guides for the interviews and focus groups were created by psychologists. The data collection method are online focus groups and semi-structured interviews so that there is also flexibility in data collection. Additionally, participants also have different backgrounds so that the research result can be more reliable. Moreover, catalytic validity, horizontal validity, fidelity, and triangulation are achieved. Considering the strengths of the last study, there are a lot of participants and they are from 32 medical schools in the UK. In order to design the survey better, a focus group was utilized to discuss it. Additionally, internal validity and reliability are achieved. In terms of the weakness, in addition to the limitations given paradigm, in the first study there are only 11 participants. Additionally, semi-structured interviews with students is the only method of data collection, so that results are too subjective and lack of reliability. Fidelity, transparency, and consistency are not achieved, and there is a problem of self-selection bias. Considering the second study, firstly, the usage of focus groups can limit the expressions of some opinions. Moreover, all the participants are from the same university, so the research findings may not be generalizable. Additionally, there is also a problem of self-selection bias, and transparency and consistency are not achieved. Regarding the third study, the responses for modifications of assessments are not verified with medical schools. Additionally, there is also a problem of self-selection bias, and the external validity is not achieved. In conclusion, the first study specifically investigates UK engineering students' experiences during the pandemic. Moreover, it also examines how digital technology influences learning and students' views on it. Findings of this study help picture technology-enhanced higher education in the future. However, the findings of this study are only meaningful in the field of UK engineering higher education due to the backgrounds of participants. Besides, it doesn't provide practical suggestions for students and policymakers to mitigate the negative effects from pandemic and utilize digital technologies in education. The second study investigates how COVID-19 influenced international university students and provide suggestions for both students and universities on how to mitigate the negative effects. However, all the participants are from the same university, so that the differences of institutions are not taken into consideration. The last study specifically investigated the influence of COVID-19 on UK final year medical school students. Recommendations about how to mitigate the negative effects are provided. Findings of this research can also help the development of new patterns of medical education and examinations. However, the qualitative method used ignored the complexity of feelings of individuals, so that many details were overlooked. Findings of these three studies can help policymakers and students deal with similar disruptions better in the future. However, none of these studies investigate long-term effects of the pandemic and how different backgrounds of students, like socioeconomic status of students' families, affect the research result. Thank you for listening, and these two slides shows annexes And here is a reference list.